Dear ladies and gentlemen, let us introduce you to the. Dear ladies and gentlemen, yo, let us introduce you to the. Ladies and gentlemen, let us introduce you to the. One time, one time, one time. Yeah, we the Grandmasters. Feel it from my head to the floor. Yeah, I'm a grand M-A-S-T-E-R. Yeah, I'm a grand M-A-S-T-E-R. One time, one time, one time. Yeah, we the Grandmasters, and I feel it through to my core. Yeah, I'm a grand M-A-S-T-E-R. Yeah, I'm a grand M-A-S-T-E-R. One time, one time, one time. Yeah, we the Grandmasters.
All right, same track we were listening to last lesson. So let's just talk about a couple principles here before we get started. A lot of people want to know, like, what's the secret combination of plugins, or what's the preset, or what's the setting? And I can't harp on this enough. I can't drive this point home enough. A good mix can't fix a bad sounding recording. Second point is a good mix won't fix bad edits. The last video that we did was all about vocal editing. So you can see if I zoom in here, we've double tracked and triple tracked our vocals. We've got two main vocals. I went in and I nudged the timing of all our double tracked vocals. Now it's time to mix them. And what I encourage people to do when they're going to mix a song is mix the vocals first. Just solo that vocal and press play.
Yeah, I'm a grand M-A-S-T-E-R.
And just look at where that's peaking.
One time, yeah, we the Grandmasters, and I feel it through to my core.
There's like one part of that that goes above that 6 dB mark or that 5 dB mark. We're going to add some compression and stuff to help control that volume level, but that's a good starting point right now. Now let's talk about the plug-in signal chain. This is like, drum roll please, what everybody always wants to know about. There's different techniques. Everybody's got a different way that they like to mix their vocals. This is just what I was taught and what I have developed a little bit over time and what works for me. I go with an EQ, then a saturation effect, a multi-band compressor, a regular compressor or a wideband compressor, and then another EQ at the end. And then sometimes if it's a really, really crazy loud vocal with big volume peaks, I'll put a limiter on the end. So we've got this track soloed. The first thing we need to do, open up an EQ. That's the FabFilter Pro Q3. That's their EQ. First thing I want to do is I'm going to pull open this FabFilter Pro Q3. This is a great plugin. When I press play, it's going to show me a frequency response curve.
Yeah, we the Grandmasters. Feel it from my head to the floor.
Look at that. Those are the different notes and pitches within his voice that are peaking. And so we can kind of like, there we go. If we hover our mouse over, Pro Q3 highlights the loudest ones and just gives us the option to go reach for those and just pull them down a little bit. I love this function about Pro Q3. And let's just press play again and listen to what it's going to sound like now with this EQ change.
Yeah, we the Grandmasters. Feel it from my head to the floor.
That's definitely better. That mid-range, that effect of him being really close on the mic, depending on how close you are to your microphone, depending on what microphone you're using. Before we start throwing this into a compressor, we want to control some of those peaks and get rid of some of those unwanted, like, extra frequencies. Now we may want to saturate this. One of the ways that you can help push that and achieve that more is through saturation. I'm often finding myself reaching for a plugin called Decapitator. So let's start turning this drive up here over time and seeing how that's affecting the vocal with this Decapitator.
Yeah, we the Grandmasters. Feel it from my head to the floor. Yeah, I'm a grand M-A-S-T-E-R. One time, one time, one time. Yeah, we the...
Kind of cool. We get this little VU meter, the attitude meter it's called, and it's as it goes into this red section on the far right is about when we got to 4 or 5 on the drive knob. You don't want to necessarily add so much that you can hear the effect. In this case, we're just enhancing the sound. We're not necessarily shaping it. So once we get to the point where we can hear what that effect is, it's probably too much. So I feel like at 2, I was not hearing it at all.
Yeah, we the Grandmasters.
But at 5, I was hearing it a lot.
Yeah, we the Grandmasters.
So somewhere in between.
Yeah, we the Grandmasters. Feel it from my head to the floor.
It's giving it that edge, but it's maybe still a little bit more than I want. Let's take this mix control and bring it down to about halfway. And now we're mixing in like a little bit of an overcooked distorted signal with a completely clean undistorted signal. So hopefully we'll get the best of both worlds here.
Yeah, we the Grandmasters. Feel it from my head to the floor.
That sounds better already. This is where multi-band compression is key. Since we're talking about a lead vocal here, I like to go to the vocal menu and use this presence and control preset. Definitely want to customize this preset for every new vocal that you're putting it on. Maybe save a preset if it's your own voice and you're mixing your own voice a lot. You definitely want to get in the habit of using presets as a shortcut to the part where you start getting creative and customizing your sound rather than grabbing a preset and just calling it done. Let's take a listen.
Yeah, we the grandmasters. Feel it from my head to the floor.
All right, so I turned this freeze button on. This is a really important thing that comes with all of the FabFilter plugins. And so that shape of the EQ just stays present. And we can kind of look at that and figure out where we want to drag each one of these separating parts here. You click, you drag it to the left or the right. So I just try to look at like where the big groups of spikes are. Cool. Now I feel like they represent the parts of the frequency that I want to actually compress. So here, these are definitely the parts of Joseph's low range of his voice. Definitely the spikes here. You can see a group of them in the mid-range. Another tiny little mound here for the upper mid-range, and then all his S and T and P sounds.
Yeah, I'm a grand M-A-S-T-E-R. One time, one time, one time. Yeah, we the grandmasters. And
now what we need to do is go through and make sure that each one of those different bands is compressing the right amount. Let's click on the low one, pulls up all our different settings here, and we're going to want to reach for this one that's called threshold. You can see what it's set to right now, and when we press play, a little green meter will come up around that dial and let us know the volume level specifically for that frequency band.
Yeah, we the grandmasters. Feel it.
You can see that where this notch, this white notch is here, is like way, way below where the actual meter is showing. So that lets us know that that's compressing too much. We need to pull that threshold way up so that it's more closer to where the peak of that meter is showing up.
Yeah, we the grandmasters. Feel it from my head to the floor. Yeah, we the grandmasters. Feel it from my head to the floor.
And you can see here on this green band, this yellow line on the curve here, that's moving up and down. That's letting us know how much it's compressing. If it's moving up and down a little bit like that, that's a good place for it to be. If it's slammed right down against the line, that's too much. Awesome. And then another really cool tool, a lot of these FabFilter plugins have this, is they have that mix control as well for the compression. So let's say we got the sound really, really controlled, but we just felt overall that it was a little bit overcompressed. We could grab that mix control right down here in the lower right-hand corner, drag it to the left a little bit, maybe somewhere around 75, and you can see that it changes the amount that EQ curve, that compression curve is at. Now we're looking for broadband compression. This is going to be something that just sits over the entire vocal and helps control that volume. This is the wideband compressor that I use a lot on my lead vocals. By turning this peak reduction knob up, I'm looking for just a little bit of movement on that meter. And it's just going to give me a little bit of extra help controlling the overall volume so that if the vocalist gets really, really loud, that we're not getting a super big peak in volume on our final mixdown.
Yeah, I'm a grand M-A-S-T-E-R. One time, one time, one time. Yeah, we the grandmasters, and I feel it through to my core.
That's great. I'm seeing this meter move just a tiny bit around -1 or -2 dB. That's not a big change in volume, but it's definitely super helpful in the big picture with multiple vocals and with multiple instruments. We are going to throw one more EQ on the end. So let's press play. Let's look at this EQ curve, and let's see if we can give this vocal a little more oomph.
Yeah, I'm a grand M-A-S-T-E-R. One time, one time, one time. Yeah, we the grandmasters.
I'm sensing like generally that's a little bit overbearing in the mid-range. We want to bring out some of that breathiness and some of that sibilance so that the vocal feels a little bit closer to us. And overall, I just feel like that bass in the voice is a little prominent here as well. So let's just do a big curve like this and see if this helps.
One time, one time, one time. Yeah, we the grandmasters. Feel it from my head to the floor.
All right, I definitely feel like that nasally stuff around 1K, getting rid of that helps. I'm thinking this low end thing helps, but it just thins it out too much overall. So here's a great trick with Pro Q3 is using the dynamic EQ function. So we're going to use just this regular EQ point to look at like where we want the volume to drop down. We can widen that up a little bit even. But we're actually going to put the gain back to 0. And right above the gain, there's this dynamic range thing. And we're going to drag this thing down instead. You can see the yellow arrow stays put, but the actual purple part that represents the EQ curve moves down. And so what's going to happen is that EQ is going to kind of act a little bit like a compressor or like a multiband compressor. And it's just going to turn down that one frequency when it gets too loud.
One time. Yeah, we the grandmasters.
So you can see certain words it pulls all the way down to the bottom, and then certain words it doesn't. We could probably even back that off a little bit. We could narrow it up a little bit more.
Yeah, we the grandmasters. Feel it from my head to the floor.
We could even do the same thing here with this big spike in the mid-range. That's great. And then last but not least, this little peak that we've got showing up here, I think we should mess with that a little bit because that's probably a T or a P sound or something kind of unpleasant. We can do the same thing, grab a couple of these, look at a couple of these other spikes. Again, if you hold your mouse over them, they just show up as peak points that you can grab. Little yellow dot shows up. Just do a couple, oops, I missed that one. Just do a couple other spots like that. Definitely more in control.
Yeah, I'm a grand M-A-S-T-E-R. One time. Yeah, we the grandmasters, and I feel it through to my core.
Now, the other thing that I would recommend doing when mixing, you guys will remember from our last video, we added some reverb and some echo. If you open up this arrow here on your track, this will open up your automation lane. And if you click on this button, by default, it should be a volume automation lane. You can add new automation lanes for pretty much anything. By default, all of your sends, you'll be able to control the level and the pan of those. So in this case, we can have reverb and echo if you do your effects through sends this way. This is crucial because automating the volume of your effect sends is something that is going to add variation to your mix. Maybe you want to have more reverb in your chorus than you do in your verse, or you want to change the amount of echo that something has. So it does not have an echo in the verse, but it does in the chorus. Automating your effects is what is going to allow you to have that variation. So again, you can open up those lanes with this arrow here on each track individually. You can change the thing that you are controlling here from this menu. And anytime you want to add something to that automation lane that comes from a specific plugin, for example, let's say we wanted to change how much distortion was on that lead vocal. All you got to do is open up the plugin. Right here below the word auto, you've got a little button. If you hover over it, it says plugin automation enable. And that'll pop open a menu where you can add things to that list. So in this case, the knob that we wanted to automate is called drive. You would find the knob, find the word drive, click add. And then now in this menu here, you can see we get an additional sub-menu for the decapitator effect, and we can add an automation lane for the drive control. It gets to be a huge pain having to do volume automation across 12 or more tracks. It's a lot of work. And a tool that I use that helps me out with a volume automation is called Vocal Rider. So you go here, this is your target volume. Let's press play and see where our meter shows up. And we just want to have our target volume be somewhere close to the top, but not all the way at the top.
One time. Yeah, we the grandmasters. Feel it from my head to the floor.
That's probably good right there.
Yeah, I'm a grand M-A-S-T-E-R.
And now what's going to happen is this is just a volume fader right here. Anytime it gets above that target volume level, it will turn the volume fader down. Anytime it's below it, it will turn the volume fader up. That's what I was trying to say. And then down here, we've got range. We can just say, like, how much do we want to allow this to change the volume? I usually shrink this a little bit. It doesn't take a big change in volume for you to hear a change in volume. Anything more than about 2 or 3 dB
and you're going to start to recognize that the volume is changing.
Yeah, I'm a grand M-A-S-T-E-R. One time, one time, one time. Yeah, we the grandmasters, and I feel it through to my core.
Awesome. So now we're getting a little help with the Vocal Writer plugin. Now this is all the stuff that has to do with mixing. This is pretty much my go-to technique anytime I'm starting with a vocal in like a pop or a hip hop or an EDM recording. I would probably do the same thing for rock music and for pretty much anything. But again, some of the creative choices, the distortion, the reverb, some of that stuff changes a little bit depending on your style of music. So you'll have to just kind of take the pieces here that you think apply to what you're working on and see if those can help you out. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about is routing. So if we put a compressor on our master bus, we might be running into problems because there might be things that are turning the volume level of other things down that when we don't want that to be happening. The best example I could think of, drummer hits the snare drum really loud, and then all of a sudden everything gets compressed and squashed, including your lead vocal. And so what I like to do is create a couple different groups here. I'm going to go into track, new track, stereo, aux input, and I'm going to create 3 auxes. And these are going to be different groups. I'm going to send different instruments to these groups. First group that I'm going to call here, this is going to be all my drums. I'm going to make another group that is called instruments. Another group here that's called pre-master. I'm going to send all of my drums here to drums group, and I'm going to compress the drums together. Those are going to be independent of any other sound. The drums, I'm then going to send to this pre-master track. And all of my instruments, if I've got guitars, if I've got bass, if I've got keyboards, if I've got any kind of samples or anything, all of that stuff is going to the instruments group. The instruments group, again, is going to the pre-master. So if the drums have to get squashed and compressed, or if the instruments have to get squashed or compressed, they don't affect each other. Both of those things are going to go to the pre-master, and so down to this pre-master, I'm able to compress those things a little bit together. The vocals, however, are going to skip that pre-master, and I'm sending those straight to the output. So whatever compression here is going to happen across all of my tracks. Drums are getting compressed, instruments are getting compressed. The vocals will not get compressed by those compressors. So we're able to control the volume of the drums together, the instruments together, and then control the volume of all of those tracks put together as a group. And then we're able to put those in the master and have the vocals sit in front of that because the vocals are not being compressed when the snare drum gets too loud, or the vocals are not being compressed when that guitar gets too loud. You want to make sure that your drums and your other elements are not causing your vocals to be compressed. That's what is going to help you get that loud and dynamic vocal sound that sits on top of your mix or sits in front of your mix. Hopefully this tutorial's been useful. Tried to keep it short and sweet and just get to the point. Thanks for watching this video. Hope you can gain something useful in your own vocal mixing, your own studio production. Make sure to stay productive out there. Keep making music. Keep making art every day. Have a good one. Peace.